Hello everyone, my name is Ayo Ayeni and today it's all about International Albinism Awareness Day. And of course, it's really centered around the human rights of a minority of people. Their population in the world is really not significant compared to the rest of us, but they are human beings all the same, and we are going to talk about them. So we'll not only fight for our rights, but for the rights of others. And I think that's how the world becomes a better place, really. So again, my name is Ayo Ayeni, and I am an advocate for family-friendly work policies and maternal mental health. I advocate for most things around family life and wellness of women and children, and I am also a business and family life strategist. But the important thing today is the person who is on this call with me. She is all kinds of awesome, like from her title to her name to everything. And I'm hoping that I'm not going to murder name. Somehow I forgot to ask her to pronounce the name. So the entire time I have this fancy pronunciation in my head, and I hope to God that I'm right. So today I have Miss Ikponwosa Ero. Oh my goodness. I hope I got that right. Did I?
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, at least you tried. So yeah, Ikponwosa Ero, everyone calls me IK.
Yeah, I was going to tempted to use the IK, but that Ikponwosa, it sounds so melodic. I couldn't resist. I couldn't resist. Okay, so Ikponwosa is a UN independent expert on the enjoyment of human rights by persons living with albinism. She is a lawyer, she's an advocate, she's all kinds of things. She's a human being first and foremost, and then she is also a person living with albinism. So there is no better person, by that within my reach, and even without that I can think of, that is more suited to talk about this issue than her today. And I am so glad to have her on this call with me. So, Aike, thank you so very much for your time. As I have said a million times, I do not take it for granted, okay? So, your title sounds very, very melodious. You never UN independence, enjoyment of human rights. Sounds, but I'm not fooled by the title. I understand how full your life can be and how busy and how intense it gets from your travels all over the world. Hearing all kinds of really not so good stories happening to other human beings, and trying to make the world a better place can be very hard. That sounds like Superman with a cape. So can you run us through, what's life like as a UN consultant, as a lawyer, as, family life generally? How do you balance it all? And, you are still this sane and cool, calm and collected. Please, we want to learn.
Thanks, Ayo, for having me and for this platform. Every platform for awareness is important to me, and I don't weigh them by how glossy they are, whether you are one big media or you are one person trying to make a difference like you are. I take them all for granted and try to fit them all in. So as you said rightfully, my name is Ikponwosa Ero, and originally from Edo State in Nigeria, and I was born and raised in Ibadan, however. So for some reason, my identity tends to, I always forget I'm not Yoruba, basically. So I grew up in Ibadan, and shortly after that, I also went to school in Benin, FGGC Benin, and then left the country before I finished at FGGC Benin. And since then, we've been in Canada, my immediate family. And finished high school, secondary school here, university, law school. And then I started working for the government of Canada in the Department of Justice, so which is the department that is the legal representative of the government, the federal government of Canada. And while I was there, records of attacks against people with albinism started, and I was really shocked. I was really shocked by that. Initially, I was in denial. I'm like, this thing is a one-off. It won't happen again. Because what was worrying was that, the body parts were missing in this person, and there were allegations that the body parts were being sold. So this was Tanzania. The report came from Tanzania. But I finally believed it like a couple of days after thinking about it, because I do remember growing up in Nigeria, in Ibadan, like at least two people, not a lot, had made reference to the fact that if you have albinism, you're one of the you're on the menu basically for witchcraft, to put it crudely. And so are some people like children, so-called virgins, people with a hump in their back, as you might have heard. Like witchcraft is irrational, right? So it targets people that appear to have rare traits. So that was my first meeting with this issue of attacks. But prior to that, I had hoped to start an NGO. In fact, I registered one in Nigeria in 2006 when I was there, because I had seen enough people with albinism on the street. You see them in the marketplace, completely burned or covered in spots, which is usually a sign of overexposure to the sun without protection. So I was hoping to do something, but nothing. I didn't have the infrastructure or the support. I was a student. Then when the attack started, I'm like, that's it. Whatever I do with this law, I have to spend some time on this issue. As God will have it, the biggest NGO on the issue opened in Canada without me realizing it. In fact, the person who opened it has albinism, he's a white guy, white Canadian, and he's a businessman. So he started with his own money. And then I emailed him, we met up, he hired me, I started working for him. I left the Department of Justice, started working for him, going to the UN back and forth to do advocacy. Because I was like, there's going to be many lawyers with albinism. There already are, but there are not going to be many lawyers who are going to the UN talk about this issue. And enough of these killings, right? By then, there were already like 200 reported cases. So finally, after lobbying at the UN says, no, this thing is not stopping. Let's create a mandate. And the mandate is created for specific issues. So they created one for this. And then the people were like, you should check it out and try and see if you get in. I'm like, okay, fine. I put in, and then the Human Rights Council appointed me in 2015. So here we are 6 years later, and many things have been done. But that's in a nutshell, the summary of me. Thanks.
The work that and the amazing work that you do. Well, when you do something over and over again, you kind of get used to it. Like, it's all good. It's what I do, but it's really amazing. Well done, IK. So, can you enlighten us about albinism in itself as a condition on its own?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, albinism is, or as Nigerians say, albino. Like Nigerians were interesting.
I practice over and over again to not say albino today, and I think we're going to tell people why later.
Yes. No, maybe we'll do it now. Why not? Because then I don't want people to get angry and get off the call, whereas they should really listen. So the word person with albinism is nowadays used to put the person before their condition, whereas albino conflates the two, like the person and the condition are one and the same. And then it makes it very hard for you to see past the albinism to the person. So we started pushing for person with albinism as the more accepted term to do advocacy, to underscore the humanity of these people, that they are just like you and me. And so of course, we can't force everybody. They have freedom of expression, which is a right. But if you can, we urge you to please help us in this regard. So people with albinism obviously have a condition known as albinism, and this is a condition that is genetic. Both parents, for most types of albinism, because they're different types, most cases, both parents have to carry the gene. Now, if mother and father carry the gene, the chances of having albinism on each pregnancy is 25%. So that's why you can see more than one albinism case in one family. That's because the chance is every pregnancy, right? It's not a package percentage. So 25% chance they will have albinism. And then the other children, there is another chance that the other children, even if they don't have albinism, are also carrying the gene. Of course, there's also a chance that some of those children will not carry the gene at all. But so it depends on the person. The condition is relatively rare, as you said. Usually you hear it's between 1 in 5,000 and 1 in 15,000 in Africa, with many tribes having 1 in 1,000. Like in Eastern Nigeria, you find 1 in 1,000 mostly. In some parts of Southern Africa, you find 1 in 1,000. But overall, it's like 1 in 5,000, 1 in 15. Europe, 1 in 17,000, or sometimes in some areas, it's 1 in 5, 1 in 12,000. Then you find some parts of South America, among the Indians, the indigenous Indians, they have like 1 in 125. And then so island communities have a higher frequency. So it really depends on whether that community has intermarried over centuries so that the gene becomes more apparent, or they are living on an island where, again, they don't have a lot of gene variety, and then the numbers go up, or It's just for some reason that we don't know, that group happens to carry the gene more than others. So there's various reasons why it's more common. But that in a nutshell is what albinism is. It tends to have two physiological consequences. One of them is inability to protect yourself from the sun. You see this brown skin, this brown melanin, is a gift, and people don't realize that, especially when they bleach it and stuff. It's a beautiful gift, especially if you're in the sun. If you don't have it, you get easily burned, and you can have skin cancer, which kills a lot of people with albinism very young. And the other consequence is visual. Most people with albinism have low vision. They can wear glasses, but it's assistive, not curative. It doesn't take away the low vision, but it helps them. So that's why sometimes I'm still reading like this, and people come on to me and say, this your glasses is not working. You should change it. And, you just laugh, because usually people just assume that, you don't know anything about your own conditions. So glasses for us is assistive, not curative. For most people, there's exceptions. Some people have enough vision to see, enough vision to drive. So there's variety even within albinism. That's a nutshell about the condition.
I'm hearing for the first time about how there are different types of albinism. I didn't know. I just thought albinism is albinism. You either have it or you don't. Okay, so how did albinism come to become an issue of human rights? Over time, we now start getting aware and conscious about human rights discussions around albinism. So how did we get here? Why is it now such a human rights issue?
I would say that mainly because of the attacks, right? The fact is, anything could be a human rights issue, right? Nowadays, everything is tied to human rights. Pick an issue and I will show you how it's linked to human rights. Because there's nothing, as human beings, we are creatures of our environment. So there's nothing in our environment, both physical or even natural in general. There's nothing in our environment that doesn't impact our well-being. And if human rights is also about well-being and not only about your right to vote, then essentially everything becomes a human right. It now becomes a matter of what your government is prioritizing, or a matter of what your environment is prioritizing. So of course, it's a human right. When albinism is a human right, because right away you think right to health, right? Everyone has a right to health, and are these people getting that right? But I think that the most important reason is the attacks. When the attacks started being reported in 2007 or so, there was no history of that, in the sense that there was a history of it happening as a ritual attack, but there was no history of it then having a economic dimension. Because now sometimes some people attack not because they care about the ritual, they're attacking because they want to sell the body parts. So they became there was now this dimension that didn't exist before, and a black market around it. And so it was very important that the right to life be reiterated and underscored. And the right to life is the hinge pin of all human rights, right? You don't have any right if you're not living. So the right to life has been expounded, advanced, developed very richly in human rights literature. And also, human rights literature and the framework itself allows for the people who are being protected to have a voice. If you're looking at this thing only from a health angle, which is what it was for many years, albinism was a health case. If you're looking at it from that angle, then we become only subject of medical research, right? The doctor will say, sit down here, open your mouth, but open your eyes, and you're just like a object of research, right? Okay, now use these glasses. But in human rights, you are both a subject and an object, which allows you not only to be studied, but allows you to speak for yourself and say, okay, doctor, now that you're done with my eyes, let me tell you what happened in class. I was beaten up because I tried to walk to the board to see the board, and my classmates started throwing things at me. Now you're talking about bullying. Now you're talking about the right to education. So that's how it became a human rights issue. The attacks triggered it, but then that now opened the doors to all these other social issues that are facing people with albinism. And then we could give things a name, right? Disabilities, because we cannot see. Right to health, because we need sunscreen and sun protection. Right not to be discriminated against, to tackle bullying. Right not to be discriminated against based on color, which is racial discrimination. So the human rights has given us the language, the empowerment, the context, the framework to really, advance and protect people like us.
Wow, That is so, that is quite a lot rolled into one bowl. So it's not just about, the health angle, it's about everything, that encompasses a person living with albinism. Okay, so I read, you've talked about the attacks, the, angle of witchcraft and everything. And I'm really glad you sent me that H power document. It was so, I was so excited to see that even the UN themselves mentioned that, they've observed that at the national levels, countries are really not talking about these issues, and so the international communities, in fact, have also just, okay, they'll just condemn and say, oh, this is condemnable, these acts are condemned, and nobody is really doing something. So I was so super excited that people are now going to be calling it what it is, witchcraft, all these really harmful practices that are not, as you said, they are not logical at all. There's no, there's no style to it. You just can't fathom it. But after reading, I then thought to myself, we're Africans, right? And we know how these things work. They are so embedded in our culture, even as human beings. So in my work in maternal mental health, for example, you see a woman who is suffering from psychosis, and they are taking her from spiritualist to spiritualist to spiritualist. Nobody will even for 1 second think, oh, wait, can it be this? So how do you think that the international communities can really help us with these issues of, witchcraft that has been so, rooted in our culture as Africans? How do you think this is going to really help?
Wow, yeah, no, it's a serious problem. The harmful practices related to accusations of witchcraft, ritual attacks, or spiritual abuse. I think it's okay for you to pray for someone, but that person needs a holistic approach. A human being is not only spiritual. Sometimes we forget that, especially in the west of the continent, in Nigeria in particular, we forget that we're not only spirits, we are also flesh. So if someone has a problem, it's not only to a spiritual doctor like a minister or a pastor. You have to take them to a physical doctor as well. So nobody's stopping you from going to church, but make sure they're getting medical care. The problem is, first of all, as you said, it's not being talked about. So people know it's a problem. There's always whispers about it, but there's not enough awareness about what to do to tackle it. And using harmful practices as the hinge to talk about this, I think is important, because harmful practice has been developed richly in the UN, in international community, even at the AU, as a series of actions that happen whether culturally or just repetitively and socially accepted, which harm people. So it has been defined well by the UN, I think, Committee on the Rights of the Child and the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women and Children being some of the most impacted by harmful practices. And they defined it because they had to tackle early child marriage, they had to tackle female genital mutilation or cutting. So we're now saying now, me, myself, and some other collaborators, we are pushing now that harmful practices also encompass accusations of witchcraft, also encompass ritual abuse, ritual attacks, so that we're not punishing those things, right? Because you are free to believe in those things. You're just not free to do harmful practices on them. So we are attacking the harmful practice and not the belief system. So I've been working with the AU, Pan-Africa Parliament, to develop guidelines. The guidelines are still in negotiation now. I'm just praying that it moves forward, because I think the guidelines are an important first step for us to give the problem a name, yeah, and then for us to find recommendations, find strategies to tackle them. So we've made recommendations such as making the guidelines, adopting the guidelines nationally, and then also then doing awareness with the particular stakeholders. So people such as Christian pastors, right? If someone comes to you and say this person's acting funny, we think there's something wrong with their mental health, they give her something in the village, the pastors should be trained to say, yes, I will pray for you, this is the plan, but the second part of the plan is for you to go and get psychiatric care. So there's a lot of recommendations like that, and recommendations to work with even traditional healers, that they too should also recommend hospital care, right? Or otherwise, they shouldn't be allowed to practice, give them licenses like doctors if they are already accepted by the community. Acknowledge them, give them licenses. That way you regulate them, right? So if they go overboard, you revoke their license. So things like that. It's going to be a while, but at least the guidelines could be a first step. So one of the things I'm trying to do before I finish my mandate in a couple of months is to try to get us to these guidelines at the Africa level, and at least get the UN to do like the first step in condemning through a resolution. So let's see. Let's see.
That is so amazing to hear. So it's like the
Mm-hmm.
name it to tame it approach. So we've all been, we're all Christian, Muslim, we're all something. We all have a bit of spiritual inclination. But when we now start to focus on harmful practices, which is the key word, I think I'm now seeing the hope in this, because you know how we are Africans. But I'm now beginning to see with the guidelines and everything you've mentioned how this may work, will work by God's grace. See, God's grace. We can't take it away from ourselves.
We can't take it.
Right. So, in a conversation we had prior, you mentioned something about mental health of people living with albinism, and it's really strange because most of my work these days kind of aligns with mental health, but I have never really sat down to think, wait, it must be really burdensome, quote unquote, to be living with albinism, not because of the condition itself, but because of the way or the impact of it, the social impact of it must really weigh a lot on the mind and mental health of. And I thought about, I'm like, this is so true. So can you tell us a little bit about, living with albinism and the mental health impacts that it has on, persons living with albinism?
Mhm. Yes, I have seen several cases of people who have mental health disturbances. Now, I don't want to presume what caused it, but I have seen reports, including from Nigeria, the Albinism Foundation there, saying that they have noted, without me even asking, yeah, their report said that they've noted a significant number of their members with mental health problems. This was before discussions about mental health became a thing. I would say I saw that report in 2012 about there. So for me, when I saw that, I was struck because I have noticed even from interacting with people with albinism around the world that there's sometimes like a lot of mental health issues, suicidal ideation. So I noticed anecdotally that it seems to be stronger when the person is getting rejection from their family, right? So if, for instance, there's one case I saw where I think it was in Tanzania, where the child had to eat separate from her brothers and sisters. She had her own plate and she ate separately in her biological family. So another one was is a young person. I don't think she had parents. I don't know why, but she wanted to kill herself. And so I think that the albinism thing is a huge factor. And then when you add their rejection within the house, so it's for me, it really underscores the need for parental acceptance because the society is so harsh when you have albinism already. You need a refuge, right? You need an oasis of peace, some little island where you can be yourself and nobody's calling you names, mocking you, asking about your condition, pinching you when you're a kid. I got that a lot from other kids. So home has to be your refuge. And if it is not, then I don't know how you're going to cope. I really don't know how you're going to cope unless you have somebody like maybe there's one friend who now happens to be your mobile refuge. Then that could work. But people who tend to break down don't have any refuge, no ring of protection, no ring of love. I fortunately had that. So even though society was cruel, I could come home and be at peace. And that's why at some point, for my own sanity, I didn't go out anymore. I remember between age 7 and 10, I just, and that's the age kids want to go out. No, mommy, take me, mommy, take me. At some point, I'm like, nope, mommy, don't take me. It's okay. I sit at home and I play with whatever we have. Because just to go out and before you go from here to like 5 minutes walk, like 10 people have called you. They've yelled out something, right? Like, Oyinbo, Whitey, Afi, hey, Afi Orira, Lawson. Before you even get to where you're going, you've heard this repeatedly and you just want to go and buy fruits. So imagine every day you are facing that, like, every day. At some point, I think my mom even like, she knew it was stressful. So she would like, okay, wait here. She would leave me in the car. Back in the day, you could leave your kids in the car. She would leave me in the car and lock all the doors. She said, I'm just running in here, picking up the clothing and I'll come back. Before she comes back, there'll be like 15 kids gathered around the car and they'll put their hands on the window. They'll be like, Ewa woma and everyone is like, and I'm just like sitting there, like wanting to disappear. Like if it's now, of course I will laugh and I'll be like, I'll even entertain them. I will dance and everything because I'm over it. But as a child, you just don't know how to process that. And I was just like, God, one day I'm like, why am I like this? By age 6, 7, I was questioning things that only adults question. Why am I here? Why am I like this? Why did God put me here? What is my purpose? Like, if I die tomorrow, would it even make a difference? Like, is it better for me not to even be in this world? I wasn't suicidal, but I was contemplating what I was trying to, what's the point
Makes sense.
of being, yeah, yeah. So maybe it was the beginning of depression, who knows? But I was just like thinking a lot. But my first plan was to stop going out. And this is not uncommon. I've read a lot of people who like, I don't go out anymore um, unless I have to. So let's just say it's an issue that even me on the mandate, I didn't get time to deal with, but I did get reports from several countries about the problem. And I hope next mandate holder, who begins in August, would take some time to focus on that and make some recommendations on how NGOs can support them or include people with albinism in their mental health programs. Yeah.
Mhm. Because I mean, if we all understood the two these things, because I mean, I found that Onyibo thing is pan Nigeria. Like it doesn't matter what tribe you are, the Onyibo is a constant, you know, and we just feel like I don't know. You guys should be used to it by now, but we do not understand the toll that that would take over time, over and over and over again on a person living with albinism. And I hope that this has given some people an insight to the impact of those seemingly little things that we do not understand how it takes its toll. So I was going to ask about the physical.
But Ayo, if you don't mind, let me just add something if you don't mind, because whenever this what you just said, whenever it comes up, people tend to have seen comments in some articles online. People are like, but you should be happy that you are Oyibo, right? At least they didn't call you something else, right? Or we meant well, what's wrong with you? Like someone cannot even joke with you. So I think I just need to clarify something that people should imagine, especially the Black people who are in the US or in diaspora. They should imagine like if every day they woke up, people were always like, "Good morning, Blackie," or "Hey, Blackie, how's it going?" And they know your name, but they chose to call you Blackie because they thought it was friendly, and they thought it was just like them. Like you should be happy that you're a Black person. After all, popular people are Black. And so every time they see you, they will yell out, "Hey, Black!" Even when you're driving on the street. If that's okay, then I agree with them that then the Oyinbo thing permanently without your name is fine too. So this is an analogy I want to put out there.
I
Yeah.
think we can all agree that it's not okay. I think we can all agree.
That's you, right? That's you. I know people
I'm sure
who've
everyone
come
would
back.
agree.
So
I mean, the toll it will take. I mean, none of these things are even happening to, well, maybe not to that extent to Black people in the diaspora, and they're already feeling the heat. There's a lot of talk around, racism and stuff, and it hasn't even got to this point, too. So we can all agree that that can be okay. Okay, so I was going to ask about the physical impact, but you've mentioned about, melanin and, what's it called now? Chances of having skin cancer being very high, and the sites, and of course, the color of your hair and everything that, just makes you different in a beautiful way, might I add, because you see this your hair on your head now. Trust me, all of us are buying wigs that color, but so maybe we'll just move on from that since you already dealt with that. So yeah, so we've talked about the physical health challenges and we've talked about the mental health challenges. And I want to ask, does this impact people living with albinism in a way that makes them to not be able to function as people who are not? So you are a lawyer and I'm a lawyer. How does the fact that you are living with albinism and I'm not, how does it impact our jobs, for example? Because I'm trying to look at it from, okay, so why do people get discriminated against in the first place? Is there something that makes you less productive, less, I don't know, less whatever than the next person?
yeah, no, it's not a functional issue. It's not about our ability to deliver. The discrimination tends to, although that's a separate issue. Like if someone is incompetent, it doesn't matter whether they have albinism or not, right? So that's a separate issue. But assuming, like, as they say, ceteris paribus, the person with and without albinism have the same level of competence, what would now come into play sometimes is the discrimination. Like people look at you and go, is this the person I want to be at my reception, right? I want to hire a receptionist. This one is going to scare my customers away. Like people have received that so many times, right? Like, I mean, I've been in places where personally, if I could share, where like I was maybe helping at the entrance of somewhere in Nigeria, and some people would come to me and they would like run away. So like imagine that a
I'm really
business owner.
surprised to hear that. I
Mhm.
must be living in a cocoon or something because I've never really had that reaction to persons living with albinism.
Yeah.
I've had mine, and I'm going to confess them later.
Okay, that's good. No, I think that everybody's okay to have prejudices, right? Because even me, I have mine about things, right, and people. But I think that maybe you're also in Lagos. I think two things: you're in Lagos, and Lagos is generally more enlightened, right? Everyone knows that. Like, look at Lagos. And then, secondly, Lagos. So you have more, even more people with albinism that are demonstrably showing that they're okay in Lagos. And I didn't grow up in Lagos, so maybe that's part of it. And then, secondly, I think things have improved a little bit. Yeah, not too much because I was in I was in Benin just a few years ago, but they've improved from my childhood. But yeah, people would just see me and be like, run away. There was a girl that constantly ran away from me when I was in FGGC Benin. She just constantly ran away. Even when we like end up, they'll put her side by side for something. She's like, she cannot. I heard her telling me, she's like, I cannot stand beside her. I just cannot. I can't bring myself to do it. And then recently I saw she added me on Facebook. And yeah, it was now my turn to go, I don't think I can add this girl. I cannot. But of course I added her. It's okay. Forgiveness is very important when you are the one that is facing a challenge. It's like a calling. I take it nowadays as a calling to actually demonstrate forgiveness, more so than most people. So it's okay. But anyways, so some people are scared. They don't want to hire you because your looks, yeah, your appearance is scary. Some people are worried because they feel like you're not going to see, yeah, which could be a problem in some jobs, right? Like, of course, I'm not going to insist to be a pilot for the sake of me and everybody, right? So that's a problem. And then sometimes even like a driver, right? Some people's vision is so bad they can't drive in countries where driving is regulated. Of course, in Nigeria, I'll jump into you can't drive, nobody's regulating or implementing the regulations. But in parts of the world where they do, many times you're not qualified. And so that's a problem, right? But when it comes to the job, employers under disability rights laws are supposed to provide accommodation. What does that entail? Like a large computer. Like right now, my screen is like maybe 22 inches. Most people use 17. I asked for a bigger screen. My computer has like an arm. There's an arm behind it, like those arms you see in like the dentist office where they connect all their equipment. We took it and they put it. My employer in Canada took it and put it behind my computer. So now my computer, I'm like moving it around. This is reasonable accommodation. It didn't cost the employer very much. Accommodation also comes in forms of, can I print documents in large print? Is in 12 point font. I'm going to make it 14. Yeah, is it okay? So those are accommodations. People do that for people who are totally blind. And there's a right that people with disabilities have to get those accommodations. What governments do to help is to pay employers back that money. If an employer accommodates you with those things with their own money, government will reimburse that employer by reducing their tax, for instance, as an incentive. So it is a right of people with albinism and amongst people with disabilities to be accommodated no matter what their impairments are, if they are able to meet those duties. But employers sometimes don't want I don't want wahala, especially when they're already in a stressful business environment. They're like, I don't want wahala. But I've seen cases where they're still employed in Lagos. I was very impressed. I've seen a few people, even lawyers, like medical assistants, nurses with albinism, where the employer, somebody thought outside the box and said, you know what, I'm going to hire this person. I'm going to give her a chance. What does she need? Fine, she can't see well. So there's always, that's what heartens me. There's always exceptions, like exceptional people that makes things so much better for you and life so much livable. They're not enough of them, but they are like you, Ayo, like taking the time to do this. Nobody sent you, nobody's paying you to do it, but you did. So I think that these are very heartwarming, even though the challenges of employment remain. Yeah.
Wow, thank you. But wow, that's beautiful to hear. We don't know this rights, and I think that's another problem with rights and stuff like that. Most of the time, we're not even aware of. So how would we demand for things that we're not aware of? Okay, so you've spoken about this, accommodation and the little things you can tweak to be able to employ people, who are just different, like people living with albinism. So how can we engage? And you mentioned that it's not just something you leave to people or to businesses. The government themselves needs to, like you mentioned, they reimburse them, they give them maybe tax rebate or something like that. So how do we begin to engage our own leaders here in Nigeria? How do we begin to say, okay, what can they really do? So we are not, let's not start, because if we start from the big things, maybe we are just going to blow our chances and we'll get overwhelmed. And you know, the world is already very, I don't know, polarized. There's too many issues. So how can we begin to engage, you know, our government, our leaders? What are the small things we can start to advocate for that they can do for us in the immediate?
Mhm. Yeah, and so Nigeria just adopted, for instance, Nigeria just adopted the Disability Act recently. And that was very welcome because it took them a very long time to get there, whereas countries like Kenya have gone ahead, right? So those acts, what they do is like they empower the government to try to enforce the rights of people with disabilities by giving employers this incentive, this tax incentive and stuff like that. The problem we always have is with implementation, right? And with making it normal, like getting people like yourself who are like consultants to start incorporating that in their work, or getting disability organizations to push for this, to give them the support to push for this. Basic things such as, let's say, putting like Braille on the Naira notes, right? I see the Canadian currency has Braille. It's not written all over, or as in the note is covered all over the note, like as if the note has crow or something. No, the notes, the Braille is at the corner, right? Like it's like maybe 2 or 3 dots. Most people don't even know. When I point out to them, do you know 20 Braille dot? They even know. So it's very discreet. But for the person who is totally blind, now they're independent. They can count their own money, right? Without stress, right? Without being cheated. So that is like one simple thing. Like, why is that not done? Kenya has done it like it's now going to 3 or so years. Kenya yesterday, for instance, just appointed a blind judge and a judge with albinism to their high courts, right? So you can imagine what they are doing to support these people. The blind judge is probably printing everything, well, not everything, but a lot of things in Braille, and then using software, expensive software on his computer. They're not even very expensive, to be honest, because you buy them once and replace as they get updated. So you can imagine it's a brilliant lawyers that got, advanced in their career, and now everybody's shocked. Out of the 7 people that could make the court of appeal, 2 have disabilities. Like, that's amazing, right? So we need to see more of that, like appointments into high places of people with disabilities to kind of be like ambassadors, like living ambassadors for the condition. So those are some concrete things I can think right away, because the bigger things will take longer to achieve. But I think with Nigeria, there's so many intelligent people in the country, disabled or not, disabilities having or not, that I find it very sad that we are behind. But I believe that once we catch up, you'll be seeing we'll be overtaking countries like Kenya in these areas with such concrete steps. Yeah.
Oh, that's very interesting about the Disability Act and stuff like that. So, is there a way that how can persons living with albinism, for example, take advantage of this? Since the government has adopted it anyways, is there a way that one can actually take advantage of this thing, especially when you are the ones who need it?
Mhm. Yes, so I can say that the Albinism Foundation of Nigeria is actually doing a very good job. They have basically gotten a lot of support from foreign missions, like ambassadors and stuff in Nigeria, to support many disability inclusive initiatives. They've trained judges and lawyers. They have also they have like a cancer program at the Abuja hospital, where if someone's having skin cancer, they can go and it's treated for free. When President Buhari his administration came in, they tried to cancel the program. They lobbied against it, and the program was reinstated. So I think the Albinism Foundation has been doing a lot of programming and engagement with the community awareness. I see them sometimes on NTA promoting albinism awareness and, Albinism Awareness Day events, for instance, on June 13, sometimes on NTA and other channels. But one thing I can point out, though, is that sometimes it seems like the activities are very concentrated in Lagos and Abuja. And I feel like, because when I went to other states, the effects of those good efforts seemed kind of weaker. And there's also problems, for instance, if somebody has cancer in, let's say, Jos, they first have to travel to Abuja to get the free cancer treatment. So why is the free cancer treatment not also in Jos? Like this person is a Nigerian, right? So, and this is a matter of life and death. So there's a lot of challenges that are yet to be tackled. But I would say that in terms of engaging that act, I think the Albinism Foundation is doing well. They even have a bill that is stuck, if I'm not mistaken. They had a bill on rare conditions. They wanted to start like a small regime on rare conditions to advance research and to advance care. And leading that bill was people with albinism. But I don't know how far it went. But they're quite active. I think they just need to be replicate more across states. Yeah.
Yes, replication. So, I mean, you've said quite a lot
Mm.
about what others can do, what we as people who are not living with the condition can do. So, what advice do you have in terms of self care for people who are actually living with albinism from your own experience? You've been here quite a while. You've seen quite a lot of things in this your lifetime, many interesting ones. So, what advice would you have in terms of self care, physical, mental,
Mhm.
every way for people who are living with the condition?
Mhm. Okay, so physically, I would say that practice sun avoidance. Indeed, like always find shade. It's annoying when you're a child because you just want to play. But if you want to play, then choose to play early in the morning, like around between 7 and 10, before the sun gets really hot, and then play like maybe from 5 to 7, and then the remaining time try to stay indoors or stay in the shade. Um, when you go out, always wear some protective clothing, which is long sleeve, breathable, right? Don't try to wear like very like material that doesn't breathe. So try like cotton, rayon, linen, things that breathe. So you wear long sleeve shirts as much as possible. Try to wear things that have high collars, and then a wide brim hat, right? And then sunshade. If you don't like wearing all those things, then you can try carrying an umbrella. I've seen some people do that. I think that's very good, like especially black or dark blue, dark colored umbrella, so it can reflect the sun away from you and not absorb it and still beat you because sometimes the UV can still penetrate. So the clothing is ideal, and if you don't have that, use the umbrella. The other option, if you have access, is to use sunscreen lotions or sunblock. Those are available in a lot of so-called fancy supermarkets, maybe more in Lagos and Abuja and maybe Ibadan, some bigger cities, but not so much in the rest of the country. That's unfortunate. Sometimes Albinism Foundation Nigeria distributes through their chapters in the states. So if you join them, you can ask, even though they are not frequently available. So then you have to revert to the clothing and practicing sun avoidance as much as you can. The other one is to, of course, take care of yourself overall. Like it's okay to like use makeup. Like I'm talking to my fellow women here because sometimes I know, especially in the eastern part of Africa, sometimes they don't want to wear makeup, and I think it's fine. Like use it as long as it's not overboard. Like try to balance between your fair looks and the makeup. That one is another session we have to talk about because some of my sisters have seen. I'm like, we need to talk. Come. Why are you wearing a black wig? It's really harsh on your skin. Doesn't bring out the best in you, right? Especially if you're looking for work, you can't go there like my skin tone and then wear this black wig and then put black eyebrows. Like now you are even scaring people more, right? So enjoy your beauties God gave you. Like highlight your beauty with makeup. Don't hide it, and then you will even be attractive because you are different, and made the difference beautiful. Then back to the to self-care, in terms of the mental health, I think it's very important to have solace or refuge of care, where you can go, whether it's your family or somebody. You can go where you know you're loved unconditionally. It's very important, because that person will balance out society. Society might be 70% of the noise you hear, but this 30% of the noise you hear will carry you through the 70 that are not good. So it's very important for you to find a refuge. If you don't in your family, your religious community, or you don't have a friend, then seek out an NGO that cares for people with disabilities, and then tell them that, look, I don't have friends, and they will probably know people to hook you up with, even if it's people with other disabilities, who are also looking for friends. That's fine. I know it's better to integrate. Yeah, it's better not to hang out with people that have only disabilities all the time, right? But that is a good place to start. And those are fantastic people who will understand you. So I would say those are some areas to start, and it's fine to have have faith, right? And having a religious side is something that is not very popular, especially in the West of the world. But I think it's important when you're different and you're struggling and you're suffering to have something that also gives you hope, a philosophy that carries you,
That is
so that even, yes, a lifeline, that helps you look ahead at something better, that keeps hope alive. Just also in case your refuge of safety breaks. Like, well, sometimes those people can betray you because they are people, make mistakes, and then you have something to lean on. So those are my general advice. And yeah, of course, work hard and do like everyone else. Work hard, take your job seriously.
it
Yeah.
sounds like advice that is useful for every one of us, like, because those lines of dependence break sometimes. Nobody is perfect, right? So wow, that sounds like church. But good church, right? No, really, it's really important that we hear these things. Even though we think we know them, it's really important that we hear another human say to us sometimes. It's really effective. So, what can we, because we've talked about the teasing, and to be quite honest, most people, I said that I had my own, what's it called now? Impressions, prior, and there's all kinds of things. So I'm going to be asking you to bust some of me. I mean, I know you are going to have many mates because you've traveled all over Africa, you've heard of all sorts. But I had my own, there's all sorts that you hear. So what can we as people who are not living with albinism, how can we help to make the day-to-day of those who are, how can we just help to make it better? Because as I said, when you don't understand something, and then again, there's all this cultural orientation, things you've heard, I feel jail, they don't see in the app. There's all sorts of really funny things that you don't even need to want to believe it. You've heard it for so long since you were a child that you've absorbed it. It's in your subconscious, and there's a bias. You're not even aware of it until you are faced with it. I was so ashamed because I had a classmate and was the top of the class, Jimmy, who was living with albinism. And I did not know. If you ask me, I'll say, no, 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 I'm not somebody who, no, no, I'm not that kind of person, until I had to be one-on-one. So there's things like you said, somebody will pinch you, like you just want to know, are they real? Do they bleed? Those kind of things. And you're not really doing it on purpose, but it's having immense negative impact on these people. So how can we, who are not living with albinism, help in our day-to-day lives to make things easier and better for those who are living with albinism?
Yeah, I can forgive ignorance, right? And curiosity. It's a good thing. They are good things because that's how we learn about one another. But I would say that just because everybody is wanting to do the same thing, it can take a toll on the person. So just I would suggest that try to know the person first before you dive into what's particular about them. So the same way you treat your other friends, like nobody, if you meet somebody that has no difference, right? The first thing is just like, how are you? Oh, you have children. Like you start talking about other things, right? And this is a luxury we don't always have. In fact, when somebody does that to me, I always look at the person like, are you not seeing me? Because I'm used to them, people like talking about this first. And so when people do that, they just come and start talking to me as if they didn't see anything. I'm always so moved. Because I always wonder, is this person just like this? Like they're just genuine? Or they've mastered the art of putting the human being first, before even their own curiosity, right? So either way, those I always have a lot of respect for them. That doesn't mean those kind of people always end up become my friends. Because in fact, I realized some of the people that I started very rudely with, they were very rude. Some of them were so friends still today. So I've realized that I don't use that to judge people, but it's something that you're just adding to the burdens I have to walk through each day, right? Imagine having a bad day already, something difficult happened, and now somebody just comes in and they're pinching you, right? So I think that even though curiosity is a healthy thing, and it's okay that you talk about the condition, but not as the first thing. Try to give them a break. Give them a break from the condition. Give them a break from social stress. Yeah, that's what I call it, a social stress. Just talk to them. How are you enjoying the course? Like then maybe like I don't know, 4 weeks later, you can bring it up, and at that point, they'll be so taken up that you saw them first that they will be very happy to share with you because they feel like they're telling somebody who will understand, somebody who wants to see them for them. So that's my advice. Yeah.
That is good advice, because sometimes we really do these things subconsciously. So I hear you, and I hear something
Mhm.
beautiful. Put the human being first. ahead of your own curiosities and ahead of whatever condition it is that you're seeing, ahead of the differences. And that's tweetable.
Mm.
Everybody go and tweet it. Put the human being first. IK said so. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to something that I truly care about, parenting. So what advice, you've talked about the home. I mean, it broke my heart, into pieces when you talked about the girl who had to eat separately in her own home. That's something I can't even begin to imagine. So what advice do you have for parents of people who are living with albinism? And for me, in my mind, there's like two categories. So there's people who themselves do not have the condition, but as you said, because they are carriers of the gene, somehow, they have children living without. I've had people in my church one time. They are both not living with albinism, and they have a child that is living with albinism. I mean, and how we are, okay, like that that is like something they will have to answer for every single day of their life. That you first of all go, and we are who we are. We can't just even hide the shock. Like, oh my God, really? Is that your child? Like, really? So even before they ask the question, they've asked the questions. So what advice do you have for those categories of parents? So parents with children who are living with albinism and they are living with albinism themselves, and parents who are not even living with albinisms, but somehow have kids who are. So, what are your parenting advice to cope for those two categories of parents?
Mm. Yeah, so yes, indeed. In fact, I wrote about this, but from the only women. I talked about women impacted by albinism in one of my UN reports. And impacted meaning they have albinism and then they had a child with or without, or they don't have albinism and then they had a child with albinism. Either way, they were women impacted. And some of the recommendations I made, they also apply to men, which includes like you have to be an advocate for your child. Like you have to be strong for them. It's very important that your child doesn't see that you are worried about society, or that you are scared or that you are ashamed. Because as a child, you look up to your parents. How are they handling this thing? Because it's me, right? And I'm going to handle it tomorrow. So how do they handle it? So I know I took a lot of my advocacy bent from my mother because she was like what you would describe as fierce nowadays. At some point, she became the PTA chairman so that she could show up at the school anytime to come and tell the teacher, Ike is not seeing the board, go and change where she's sitting. And she would speak up all the time. And then when I told her I was being bullied, she showed up. Then she made my dad show up. So it's very important that at least one of these parents, if not two of them, should be an advocate. Like ask your child, is everything okay? Can you see the board? Who's anybody beating you in school? A problem you have, and then act on it right away. And then you speak power into your child, right? Because they always feel disempowered. Speak power into your child, like by minimizing the negative, not saying that it doesn't exist, but minimizing those people, like in a way that you see those people are ignorant, right? So you don't have to, it's not being abusive, just telling them that this thing they're saying is not important because those people are ignorant. God made you, and so they don't have a right. They don't have a right to minimize you because God made them too, even they don't know why they look the way they do. They're just coming to you because you're a minority. Like give them logical, powerful reasons. Sorry?
I said, funny enough, you're right. We don't know why we look the way we do.
Mm-hmm.
All of us.
No, we don't. We don't. The power is in numbers, right? Imagine if it was reversed and we were 1 million people with albinism and there was 40 people that didn't have, right? Then suddenly those 40 people might be looked down on. And we'll now be looking at this melanin like, hey. So it's a number issue, right? And so people don't think about it. That why weren't you born in like Russia, right? And have like blonde hair and blue eyes. So there was a reason why you're born the way you are that even you don't know. Your life is a mystery. So is mine, to a certain extent. And so those are the things that I was told that I've talked to other people who turned out quite well, who had similar acceptance as I did. Like some lawyer, the first lawyer in Tanzania is a friend of mine, the first lawyer ever. Whereas Nigeria, we had our own lawyer like before I was born with albinism. But Tanzania got there first, like in 2011. So, and so I was talking to his mom and him, and indeed, a lot of you speak power and resilience into their hearts. Give them answers to those people without fighting with those people. Of course, sometimes you can fight with those people if it's really bad, right? What they say, or you can argue with them or put them in their place. But if it's just general name calling, don't spend your time constantly abusing those people because they are ignorant, but focus your energy on your child's planting seeds of resilience into him or her, because they will remember later that I was valuable because my parents saw me valuable, who is the number one lover of my life. And then secondly, I was valuable because now that I have this repository of philosophies that I can rely on that have told me I'm valuable, and they've become part of me. Like I've absorbed them. They're now part of me. They become flesh. The word really becomes, incarnate. Yeah, it really does. And so the parents planting those words in their kids, and do not be afraid. Find other parents or children with albinism. Nowadays it's easy. My parents didn't have that network. But nowadays you Google and you just next thing you're sending email, next thing you're meeting, next thing you're all laughing about similar issues. So I think find other support structures. Don't pretend that it's this albinism doesn't exist. Like I've seen some parents where they're just like, no problem. And your child is fine. Totally fine. Because even that parent has not processed it yet, right? So I don't know. I don't think that's a healthy approach, but it's okay if the other parent is an advocate, then it's fine. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. That is, I mean, it sounds, it may not be easy every day, but it's very doable. Draw strength from
Mm.
everything. So I want to
Mm.
ask, you mentioned a few communities, a few NGOs, while you were speaking in Nigeria, that people can really go to for support, for community, for, questions, whatever it is, to just form that bond, that alliance. So are there some
Mm-hmm.
organizations or communities that you would recommend that people living with albinism can reach out to, both for the purpose of community
Mm-hmm.
and for the purpose of, advocacy?
Mm-hmm. Yes, of course. So in Nigeria, there is the Albinism Foundation. I think they call themselves the Albino Foundation, which is unfortunate, but that's, I guess, they started from where people will understand them. Yes, I know. So the TAF, they are there in Abuja, in Lagos, and they have a chapter in every part of every state, I believe.
Really, every single
Active to
state.
different degrees, but Lagos and Abuja are very active. In Lagos also, yes, that's what they said to me. They have like but when they say chapter, I think they mean like one person, like a focal point.
Oh, but that's good enough. I
But
mean,
still, that's
I'm
something
thinking
they've done really
because
well for themselves.
I mean, that's
Mm-hmm.
good enough. I mean, even if it's one person, because I'm seeing this in terms of, all because as you said, it's very problematic. And it's not only with albinism, it's almost with every single issue, including maternal mental health, including all this advocacy we are doing around parenting, is usually within Lagos, Abuja, and all the cosmopolitan places. So we're thinking of, okay, how do we reach the woman in Borno, that where nobody wants to live and work,
Exactly.
by the way, because of all the insurgencies, going on. So it's really comforting to hear that at least there's one desk, one person in everywhere. Okay.
Exactly. No, their chairperson, J.K. Pele, has done really well. So there's them. There's also, then they are online. They have Facebook, they have websites, they have a lot of support from foreign diplomats. There's also in Lagos, there's a smaller, more recent organization called the OAM, Onome Akinlolu Majaro Foundation, because I think she got married, the girl with albinism got married to the man without albinism. And that blew up on Bella Niger because they were such a gorgeous couple, and people that was another discussion. I invite people to go read the comments on on those wedding photos of Onome and her husband, because it really showed what a lot of Nigerians thinking were, like, oh, she's so lucky. And I'm like, what about he's lucky? I think she's gorgeous, she's educated, like, hello. So yeah, there's that OAM Foundation, and there's also the smallest of all. It's called the Albinism Network of Nigeria or something association, TANA, Atana. So I think the first two for sure have presences online. I'm not sure about the third. And then if you want to find albinism groups across Africa, there's a website called actiononalbinism.org. So actiononalbinism.org. And then you can contact them, find whatever group you want to find there.
Amazing. It's really beautiful what internet has helped us to achieve. So you don't even have to stick with, as you said, Nigeria. You can just go across borders and broaden your horizon, and, don't sit at home and sulk. Even though sitting at home sometimes is good. I mean, you're avoiding the sun. I'm a very optimistic person. I'm thinking, well, at least you're avoiding the
Mhm.
stuff, but it's not good that, it's coming from a place of mental health. So, the world has become, there's so many issues in the world right now, okay? Like, there's so many big issues. There's insurgencies, there's killings here and there. We're afraid of food shortage in Nigeria because many people are afraid to go to their farms because they are being attacked.
Oh
So, how
wow.
do we then speak about this? And it doesn't, all these quote unquote big issues doesn't make smaller the issues of, for example, people living with albinism. It is what it is. So how do we then try to continue to speak up, even if it's a small thing or a big thing, in a world that is so restless and unresponsive, because every other person has a lot of more important things going on. So how do we then continue to uphold the rights, the basic human rights of, a minority of people like those living with albinism in these kinds of societies that we now find ourselves in?
Mhm. Yeah, indeed. So that's it's a critical question, especially like government, right? Because government works with big numbers, big issues, and people like to talk about big things because then it make them look like they're doing big things. So albinism has really suffered in that regard, right? However, we try to remind people of certain things that has kind of helped. First, our issue is not about doing something always specific about albinism. It's about integrating it into existing things. So, for instance, you're doing MMH work. So, for instance, you could then have like a special attention, maybe 1 month on women with disabilities, right? And then you now then include women with albinism. Like you make an effort to include women with albinism, not just somebody in a wheelchair, like what we call the classic disabilities, right?
Mm.
So that's one way, is integration. And I say that to governments. Another way is in like doing concrete things that actually can change their lives overnight. For instance, like specific measures in health, like making sunscreen lotion become an essential medicine. Every year, the government has an essential medicine list where they bring in things like antibiotics or ARVs for people with HIV. Those are essential medicines according to WHO. And even when WHO has not declared sunscreen essential medicine because of people with albinism, which I hope they will one day, countries went ahead. Malawi, I believe Kenya, South Africa, they went ahead and put it on their list anyway. And now they're purchasing sunscreen as a matter of course, right? And so now sunscreen is available in the country as a drug for people with albinism. So this is another specific thing. So we ask them, okay, well, we don't expect you to do specific things because we're a small group. Integrate us and then do some specific measures. Once you do those things, you change lives, right?
Mm.
Because fine, we talk about big issues all the time, but how many people are actually changing lives with those big issues? Yeah, they're just talking. They're talking and they're using the right words, but they don't, it's not concrete enough to change individuals' lives. And you can really change individuals' lives when you do concrete things. So I always tell people albinism is one of those areas where concrete measures literally can change a whole people group overnight. And they have an obligation, governments, to do it because they signed the SDGs. And the pledge of the SDG is what? To leave nobody behind, starting with the furthest behind first. So
Mm.
the MDGs were great, but they were aggregate. How are women doing? How are disabilities doing? Like big, big numbers. And so people who were left behind were even further left behind because we're measuring aggregate. So while it was good, the SDGs decided to try to fix that by making this pledge to leave no one behind. And also by, which means reaching out to those who like think, oh, wait, this kind of people we've not really heard from them ever. Like maybe next time we'll include them more. Or my program actually never dealt with women with disabilities or people with disabilities in general. Let's include them in our program and consult on how we can do that. So those are the efforts that I think that's the philosophical underpinning now is the SDG to leave no one behind. And then there's evidence that integration and concrete measures can work. So while we're trying to solve the big problems of the world, we can solve even the ones in our backyard by very small, small steps.
That sounds so genius. So while we are saying, for example, now I'm thinking of myself. So while I'm saying maternal mental health, so I can say, okay, wait, how
Mhm,
does being a person living with albinism then impact on your mental
mhm,
health? Is there a certain level of
mhm,
anxiety? How are you treated in the
mhm,
hospitals?
mhm,
Yeah, so I'm beginning to
mhm,
think in my head, how can I begin to include, the small numbers in my big in my big agenda. And that is so genius. Thank you for saying that, Ike. I'm already going to school. I'm adjusting, I'm adapting to in my own small corner of the world. So I have a philosophy that people are afraid of what they don't understand. Sometimes they scare you, sometimes it amuses you, sometimes you are, I don't know, all kinds of. So what are some myths that you've heard in your around albinism, in all your walk around albinism across the world? What are some myths about albinism that you've heard that you're like, really, come on? I've heard a few, and I'm not even living with albinism, and I've been like, come on, please. So I can imagine.
I want to hear the ones that you have.
Well, I heard oh, they don't see in the afternoon. I also heard that, oh, person living with albinism, they smell a certain kind of way, that they have this odor around them. I've also heard that they don't take salt, so even in Yoruba, you see that when someone wants to tease you about your, how saltless your food is, they link it with albinism. Like, why is your food so saltless now? So those are some that jumps up. I am off the top of my head. Like the ones where they don't see is really crazy. Like they don't see at all in the sun. And once there is sun, no, they're like bat, they don't see. And the worst one is, people they smell a certain kind of way. And that's the one that I was most ashamed of, because it wasn't even something that I was aware of. Like it wasn't I didn't have those facts in my head, like I just turned to them each time. It's just subconscious, when you heard it over and over and over again. And I found myself saying, oh, there's this person living with albinism in my class. I just wanted to move close to him to see, do they really smell funny? And after that, I was so ashamed of myself, like, oh my God, I cannot believe that was you doing that. But I did, right? I know they don't smell funny. Thank you.
Yeah, no, we don't. Thanks for that. Was courageous to admit that you had this, and of course you were told. It wasn't like you were born and right away you knew, right? You were told because you belong to a society that kept this kind of myth. So yeah, those are true myths. I had all of them in my childhood said to me, and they're all based on some level of truth, except the salt one. The salt one, I'm not sure if that one is true. I've always eaten salt, and my mom thinks to her. She said that even as a child, that I used to open the cupboard where there was salt and sugar, and I used to just take salt and just pour it to my mouth, and that guests would come over and they'd be like, "Eh, your daughter is eating salt," and she's like, "No, it's fine. Like there's nothing connected to that, unless the child has a problem with salt in any case, right? Aside from albinism, that's fine. But most people, there's no scientific link." And sometimes they say it's because you eat salt that you have spots on your skin. That's also a myth. A lot of the spots are caused by exposure to sun without protection. There's also the one that you don't see in the afternoon. That's kind of true because the sun is very bright. And one of the problems with our vision is your vision is reduced, one, because of the way your eyes have formed. Apparently, the eyes need some level of melanin to form for the nerves to cross properly. And if the melanin is not enough, the crossing will take a different form. And because of that, structurally, your eyes are not fixable. And the result will be you can't see as well as you should. But depending on how misrouted, your vision can be very bad or quite good, depending, right? So people's vision varies. But in general, the notice, which is my type, the one that has skin, hair, and eyes, to different degrees. And when the sunlight is very bright, then it diminishes our vision because there's not enough color to provide internal shades from the light. So the eyes cannot filter, like your own eyes now, the melanin is filtering out bright light. But I don't have melanin to filter it out. And so what happens is all the light is just entering, and my brain is like, oh, we don't want this much light, right? And so because of that, you naturally just do like this, or you your eyes close because your body is trying to protect you from the light. So that's why there's nothing mythical about it. It's just a science. And to protect yourself, you get glasses that change, become darker in the sun. Like my own, if I go in the sun now, it becomes dark. Or I wear sunglasses. That's a prescription that are glasses as well, very dark, that covers everything. And then I can see in the afternoon when I wear those, no problem. And then on the other myths that I've heard, is that I heard one that we don't eat shrimp. That one in Mozambique. I was like, are you kidding? I tried to force her to eat shrimp. She's like, no, never. She touched it. Because I asked her parents, like, is anybody allergic to shrimp in your family? Nobody. I'm like, she's like, no, I was told that we can't eat shrimp by a doctor. No, never. We don't ever touch shrimp. So that's one. I was like, if she has allergy, we will know, right? Even if it's just a little taste. But anyways, whatever. I took a risk there. She didn't accept. There's also myths that if you sleep with a woman with albinism, you will cure HIV, you will cure STIs and all that, which
Yeah.
has given people STIs who are not meant to have it. So that was a very dangerous one. There's also like the one that's, of course, if you attack them and use their body parts, you put it in ritual, then you will get what you want. All of these are false because nobody has gotten what they want with this. In fact, people have ended up in jail where they have arrested them. And I don't know who came up with this rubbish. It's obviously they're just trying to show that my medicine is strong. So every time they'll be asking for something funny, go and find an elephant that doesn't have ears, or go and find a dog that looks like a cat. It's just to make people think that this witch doctor is really, they are doing very, powerful medicine. There's nothing about it, about people with albinism that changes that. So that's the worst myths I've heard, but everything else seems to range around food. The odor thing is false too. Of course, I've met people with albinism that didn't smell nice, but oftentimes I could link it to hygiene because you would see in the person's exterior that oftentimes the person didn't have proper grooming or hygiene, maybe out of poverty or lack of knowledge. But I've met like very, very stylish. I've hung out with the models with albinism. I've hung out with the regular people with albinism, and nobody has a particular odor. There's been one case where the person, she had skin cancer that had expanded, right? It was spreading. And so it was becoming like a sore. Then it had a smell, a very bad smell. But that's rare. It's when somebody's cancer is really spread that you see that. But the average person don't have, which is funny because in some parts of the West are said to have odors, you see. So this shows that it's all about stereotypes and people not understanding people.
Yes, yes. I found that out myself in the most shameful way. My tie.
Oh, really?
Okay, so
Wow.
beyond all the gloom, I mean, we've talked about how, people living with albinism are discriminated against, how, they are targets of, harmful practices around witchcraft and ritual
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. So beyond all this gloom, I mean, the theme for this year's International Albinism Awareness Day is Strength Beyond Odds.
Mm.
Right, so irrespective of all these odds that we've talked about, so what can you highlight? I mean, you are a very shiny bright example, and there's this other lady from South Africa who is also a lawyer, ironically, and she's also,
Tanjo, she's
yeah,
my friend, yeah.
she's so pretty, and I just love her philosophies. I like how she
Mm-hmm.
stands her ground. Like, the girl does not take nonsense. Like, it doesn't take nonsense. I know that those kind of things were built over time, and as you said, different factors were playing. So, can you highlight the achievements of some people, who are living with albinism around the world? How they are defying all odds? Because I want all our brothers and sisters who are living with albinism, who are locking themselves up currently, struggling with mental health issues right now, who are just not in a good place. I want them to get inspiration from all of these shining examples, and they may not be looking out, or it may be that, the person is tucked away somewhere, cut off from reality, whatever the reason is that they are not seeing all these people that I am seeing. Please, how can, what are the, you've mentioned some people who are judges, a country that just produced their first lawyer living with albinism, which is great because, I mean, it may seem like they are backward. That's one way to look at it. Like, oh, please, you guys are backward. But another way to look at it is like, things are happening even in this generation, even with new breeds of people. A lot of narratives are being changed. So what are some of the highlights of, other people who are living with albinism that we all can draw inspiration from? Strength against all odds.
Well, yeah, no, I think that yes, it's true. Strength beyond all odds is the theme this year, and it was just really to first of all encourage everybody in COVID, right? It might not be a strong thing over in the region right now of Africa, but around the world, it's been a big deal. So just to encourage everyone, but also to highlight people with albinism who have succeeded. Most of them have succeeded mostly because of their own personal strength, not because the society had necessarily always been supportive, especially in the Africa region. So it was just to give an opportunity to highlight some of these people. A lot of them have done well in school. They found jobs for themselves just by focusing on the simple things such as hard work, resilience, talking themselves out of difficult situations, out of pain, blocking out negativity, blocking out name calling. They've taken their own initiative to speak for themselves, right? Like, go to an employer and say, look, it is my right that you accommodate me, the government will pay you back. Or they've gone to an NGO to ask for help. They were not ashamed to ask for help. So this was just to highlight, the theme was to highlight people with albinism who have helped themselves for the most part, which is basically most people with albinism today who have succeeded. It was the family support that led them to help themselves. So I want to encourage everyone with albinism out there who has not seen the people you're mentioning, such as Tanda Hopa, who is now who's a lawyer and a model, or they've not met the first lawyer in Tanzania, or the lecturers that exist in several countries, including Mozambique and Zimbabwe, or the teachers. They've not met those people, nurses. I think what all of them had in common was to try to keep hope alive, because just because today you're suffering doesn't mean tomorrow you will. To keep hope alive, and also to realize that it is possible to make something of yourself as long as you are willing to learn and you are willing to look at the fact that you are fearfully and wonderfully made. Nobody can take that away from you, not one. They may sound like they can and they want to, but they actually cannot. And so your life, you are here for a reason. That reason will be made known to you if you're just patient. Take one day at a time, do your best, be honest, have a good reputation by having good integrity. And you will see you will get rewarded for all of that in due course. So this is the basic advice that everybody gets, that I just want to reiterate for people with albinism, that it is actually something that works for us as well. So hang in there and know that the best is yet to come.
Oh, that's amazing advice. Like, I'm taking the advice myself now, hook, line, sinker, and everything in between. Because as you said, this applies to every single human being. And, that just goes to show that we are really not that different from each other at all. It's just a little tweaks of genetics, a little bit of this here, a little less of that there. And that's all there is to all of these differences that we see. Thank you so much, Ike. So do you have any final words? It's been amazing. I can't believe how much time has passed. It's just like me here chilling and it's can't believe how much time has passed. And I want to thank you so much, because it's the middle of the day for you. I'm winding down my day here in Nigeria. Your day is just starting. So I can imagine. And I hear that highly successful people like you don't joke with the beginning of their days. So I can imagine that.
Normally, yes.
I can imagine this is quite something, to have taken time out to do. So do you have any final words so we can wrap up and we can let you go do important UN stuff?
No, this was important. I just want to congratulate anyone who made it this far. It was a long interview. So if you stay to this end, thank you so much. And I believe that we can change the existence of people with albinism one person at a time, because that's how, the most excellent, shall I say, evangelizations have been carried out. It's person to person without even internet. So I believe in the power of having allies. So thank you for staying this long. And thank you, Ayo, for all your questions. I think they were quite comprehensive. If anybody needs more, I'm on social media at UN Albinism, and they can find out more about the mandate from there.
Thank you so much, Ike. So what I'll try to do is I'll try to cut this into bits and highlight some of the, some of the major aspects of it. And then I'm going to post this last part where you said, if you've made it this far, so that people are going to just go and watch from the beginning and try to make it this far. Thank you so much for your time.
No
I wish you
problem.
a really good day.
Thanks.
Happy International. Oh my goodness, now I'm mixing up the day now. The name.
That's good. Yeah.
Happy Albinism Awareness Day to you and to everyone and to me.
Thank you.
Thank you so
And
much.
to you too. Thanks so much.
God bless
All
you,
right.
sister. Have a good
Thanks. You
day.
too. Thanks. Bye.
That was quite a conversation. Like I thoroughly enjoyed myself. I thoroughly enjoyed that conversation with IK. I mean, at the end of the day, all these things are, there's only a few tweaks. So when we talk about people who are living with albinism or people who are just different one way or the other, it's just one tiny, really tweak here and there that makes us different. And discrimination is the worst. And I'm really glad about all the advancements in advocacy, in policies, in agreements that our leaders are beginning to get in on. I hope that we are going to be able to take full advantage of this. So, thank you so very much for listening to this from wherever part of the world that you're in. I hope that you take all those advice that IK has given word for word, piece for piece, and because I intend to do that myself. Thank you so much. Have a good day. Bye.